So my name's Chris Atherton. I'm a senior educational psychologist in East Renfrewshire Council, and Fiona McKenzie had approached myself and Lindsay Potter, my colleague who works in Barrhead High School, to come and speak to you about some of the work that we're undertaking at a local authority level and also at a school level in the area of emotionally based school absence. You might notice from the original notes that the word avoidance was in the title, so I'm going to speak about that in a second, but you can see that we've changed that to absence because that's the terminology that we use within East Renfrewshire. When I think about emotionally based school absence, I'm minded of a question that my children ask me very regularly: why do we have to go to school? And I suppose it stems back to when I was going through that initial transition with the oldest one, and she was going to primary one, or she was attempting not to go to primary one. Nothing speaks success in life like being a psychologist standing in the middle of a playground where your daughter grabs your leg and refuses to budge. And you've got the tears and the snotters, and you've got the head teacher that has to come out and take her off you. And you feel like you're completely abandoning her. And then you go to your car and you feel that sense of shame. Has anybody been in that position before? Thank goodness for that. So those tears and snotters, they're gone now. She's away to Lockerbie this week. She's in primary 7, not a jot, didn't look back, had to wave to the bus. Her friends waved. She was like that. And then I had the next one come along. She's different. There was still tears and snotters, there was grabbing, there was hugs, but it was me that was trying to get attention from her as she toddled on into school. Totally different, same conditions, totally different personalities. And I think about why do children go to school? We know that there's a million reasons. We know as educators there's a million reasons, but for individual young people, the story is very different. And if we want to be cynical and take it right back to basics, that on the left-hand side is the first school in Barrhead, the Levermilde School, and that was there for part-timers. The expectation was that kids went to school part-time because we wanted a literate and numerate workforce, because the kids that were working in the local mill, somebody had the bright idea of educating the masses rather than just a select few. And it's not that long ago. So things have changed immeasurably, and this is Barrhead High School today. It's a fantastic environment to learn, with fantastic people inside it. And Lindsay's one of those, and she's going to tell you a wee bit of a story about how she's attempting to tackle EBSA with her colleagues and with partner agencies. But Fiona gave us the title for this, so it is a wee bit of a retrofit, but she said, you know, with all the work that you're doing, could you maybe link it into the 6 principles of nurture? And actually, that's no bother. That wasn't, hard to do at all. The one I want to pick out first, I've spoken a wee bit about transitions. Transitions are important in the life of a child. We know that there's a peak in EBSA between 5 and 6 years old. We know that there's another one between 12 and 14. So transitions and change are important and fundamental. We know that when somebody doesn't come to school, it's because of usually one of two things, if we want to be really simplistic about it. It's because something's pulling them out of school, or something is deterring them from wanting to go in the first place. The thing that I want to talk about, though, is where do we start as practitioners? What is our narrative around EBSA? How do we use language to communicate about this area? And that's why I don't like the word avoidance. If you've got a child that's a young carer, or that you've got a child in your school who's a victim of domestic violence, and they want to stay at home in case their father turns up at the house while they're in school, what right have we got to say that they're avoiding school? So language is a vital means of communication, and it starts with us and how we develop a narrative around this area. And we will use from time to time words like avoidance, absence, truancy. Back when I was at school, it was docking it. Something else now. But we come across these words, and sometimes they might be right. Sometimes a child might be refusing to attend school. But how helpful is that to us as practitioners when we're working with parents and working with young people to get onto the same page and find some common ground to improve the picture? So this is the definition that we've got within our own local authority. Having looked at the literature, having looked at the research, this is how we've chosen to define this area for our own practice going forward. Now, I pulled this slide together, and it's interesting the context was mentioned in the keynote speech there. I pulled this not to depress the life out of you. Goodness knows the news cycle the last couple of weeks will have done that anyway, but we are working in difficult times. We're working in troubled waters. There are a number of influences that are working against us. And you have to almost fight against all of that and keep the heads and keep hopeful and keep positive about what school can offer people. And see that school is not just about the attainment side of things. School is a vessel for cultural change. It's about educating people in all sorts of ways to be better citizens. And we need to make sure that our school environments are speaking to their experience and are relevant to them all the time. So we need to take full account of the context. And we have national pressures, we've got global pressures, we've got local pressures as well. I've highlighted free school meal entitlement, ASM, care experience and SIMDs 1 to 3. Those are our pockets of vulnerability when we look at the stats. But that's a pattern. Within those stats, there are individual stories, and you're going to hear a wee bit about that in a second. You also need to know your school community. We've got varying population across East Renfrewshire. We've got pockets of significant affluence and we've got pockets of extreme poverty. They're small compared to other authorities, admittedly, but we need to know our own school's individual story. Barrhead High School has probably our highest concentration of poverty in the local community. So what works for Barrhead High might not necessarily work for Williamwood High or Mearns Castle High School or St High School, other schools that we serve. So hopefully you'll see a bit of an interface between work that's done at a local authority level here and how that transcends into schools and how schools use that, elements of that in their practice and move in different directions as well, which are suitable for their context. That may be a wee bit small to see everything that's on the left-hand side there, but I've pulled that table across from our own EBSA practitioner guidance. There's a QR code that's coming up in a couple of slides, so don't worry about it. You can get straight in, you can see the whole entire document in a minute. But it's an incredibly complex area. The contributing factors around non-attendance in school, school absence are numerous. They can be at the individual level, they can be community-based, they can be school-based as well, to do with the culture that our schools have, the culture between peers, the relationships within our school environments, fundamental. And only some of those things are controllable as a practitioner. So we need to be able to be aware of all this and be able to keep a critical eye on the things that we can actually change and improve over time. And we know that the outcomes can be quite drastic if we don't get these things right and we don't improve school attendance. And I'd just like to digest some of those things on the right-hand side there. But ultimately, it's that last point there. Where you've got EBSA becoming frequent and sustained over time, it can have a detrimental impact on the child or young person's social and emotional development, as well as their learning. And that in turn keeps that intergenerational cycle going and going and going. And then I looked at the 4 key themes of today's event, which are on the right-hand side there, and I started to map those out. Where would I put them in order of priority? How do I see those things interlinking and fitting together? I think for me, the well-being of children and young people is fundamentally at the centre of all of that. Their participation in their environment, second, learning, teaching and assessment coming around that, and then school and system-wide improvement beyond that. And the parallels were immediately, for me, drawn between that interpretation and something that forms the building blocks of your training as an educational psychologist. If you've never used Bronfenbrenner's systems theory in a presentation, you're not irritating enough to be an educational psychologist. That's the. But it is about the interlinking effects between different systems at all levels, and some of those are visible and some of those are invisible. The word relationships was used earlier on. Our relationship to transcend those systems, to develop those relationships with parents, to develop those relationships with our partners is fundamental to improving attendance. At a school and system-wide level across East Renfrewshire, we've been involved in a lot of work. It started with developing EBSA guidance as one particular document within a wider framework we call Healthier Minds. That started off with a couple of us within the psych service team developing some routine guidance around normalising ordinary conversations about mental wellbeing and starting to try and culturally move people away from pathologising everything and for everything to be going down that kind of diagnostic route and depression and all these words that are quite emotive. Those things exist, absolutely, but I think people are sucked into this kind of treatment ideology, which is at times unhelpful. So that was the starting point for us. But it grew over time, and we had to develop different strands to it. And we've now got a Healthier Mind service using school counselling money. And that's a multi-agency, multi-partnership enterprise. We were also lucky enough to have a department that were open to the idea that we needed something different for a select number of learners that were struggling immensely to get into their school environment because of their mental health and wellbeing, or because of things like neurodiverse presentations. So we created something called the Learn Well service, using a combination of money from the SEF fund, the Children and Young Persons Fund, and our whole family wellbeing fund to knit together small pockets of money in a small authority to create a service that now operates out of an old janitorial building and helps get kids back into routine, helps get them engaged in their learning again, engages them in wellbeing activities, and ultimately the hope would be for some of those learners that we get them back into their school environment as well. So taking a graded exposure approach. And the difference for some of those young people is pretty profound when they get into some place of being and some place of belonging on a day-to-day basis, and that's our starting point. We've reaffirmed our commitment to GIRFEC, we're developing practitioner guidance around that, and also our aspirations for ESL learners. All these things are interlinked. But one of the things that we've developed in partnership with Barrhead High School is the Be Well survey, which has been developed from the Glasgow Motivation and Wellbeing Profile, which some of you may be familiar with. And within that, I've not got all the questions up here. There's a presentation in itself just talking about that. But this slide is just designed to give you an insight into what we're now able to track using this survey tool. So this year, with a 93% response rate across the school, we've got 36 questions. It's a 5-point Likert scale, so pupils are asked whether they strongly or strongly disagree, strongly agree or strongly disagree with each statement, and then we've got a way of interpreting that across the Shinari indicators, and also using what we call the 7 teachable skills of resilience to analyse patterns within the group and see if there's ways in which we can be more targeted in terms of interventions that we take forward. So this is the data for this year, and you'll see things like safe or below, active or below. And the school have got a response plan to that. They're running events, there's spotlights on it. They're able to interpret whether it's about safety in school or about safety in the community. What we know is it's safety in the community. Some of the things that are on there just now. So this toolkit, it assists us in our repertoire of information, all the things that we can pull together. You can look at attendance stats as raw data, and that'll tell you one story. But we want to look at how young people feel about their school experience, what their wellbeing is like, what their sense of belonging, and also whether they're developing the right tools of resilience. So it breaks it down into individual resilience areas. And you can see that the one that's lowest at the moment is empathy. So again, it raises questions for us in terms of how do we address that within the school community. Again, this will be difficult for you to see at the bottom here, but I've mentioned one of our pockets of vulnerability being our care experience population. We're seeing a bit of a rise with these strategic approaches, and also the school's own individual focus on these young people. So I can write off a couple of stats for you there from the bottom one. That October this year, our care experience pupils in primary are at 95% attendance compared to 94% attendance in primary. Overall for last year it was 92, so we're on course to beat that. We just need to see, because you have to keep on keeping on every day. And in secondary school, it's a different picture. I think most authorities would see the same thing. It's lower, but at the moment it's sitting at 83%. Same time last year it was at 80%. And overall for last year it was 76%. So we're nudging the figures in the right direction over time through all these different strategies. I'm going to hand you over to Lindsay, who's going to speak about one school's individual journey in terms of looking at this in more detail.
Hi there, my name is Lindsay and I'm from Barrhead High School, and I previously held responsibility for support. I've since had a change of remit, but I'll try to recall everything as best I can. The first thing I would like to stress is that you'll look at our attendance stats here and you'll say ours are much better. Attendance is an area that we have prioritised for a number of years, and we've put an awful lot of work into trying to improve attendance to bring about improvement for young people. But it's not something that we have cracked yet. But our stats are probably pretty much in line with many other schools across the country, particularly post-COVID, that have seen that decline and that fluctuation. So I'm pleased to say that currently, if you look at our stats today, if you were to lift them, we're sitting at 90%, which is just sitting at the national average. And of course, that gives us past couple of years that we're starting to see that improvement. So we're starting to see some benefits of all the interventions that we're putting in place. And we have thrown the kitchen sink at it for a number of years now. We have been trying incredibly hard. So I'm going to talk to you about just some of the things that we have been doing. If I take a starting point, when I took over for pastoral, I could see gaps. I didn't have a pastoral background myself, so maybe that's why I was seeing the gaps. But one of the first things that struck me was coding, CMIS. People were using different codings and there was a lack of consistency around that. In terms of follow-up and letters and processes, again, there was a lack of consistency. And I can see a lot of you nodding heads there. And I reached out to the local authority and we brought in someone to speak to the staff and we got some guidance around that. But it was a major area because we know that attendance is one of the most important factors in school. It's your first step in safeguarding. So those records have to be absolutely accurate. There's no negotiation about that. And I'm really lucky that I work with such a fantastic team. And I don't just mean within the pastoral team, I mean wider school. So they could see the gaps themselves and they wanted to bring about improvement. So that was the first hurdle for me. Everybody was on board and wanted to see change. But the next thing that I wanted to do was to look at how we drove granular change throughout the system. And there was two sides of it for me. There was that admin side of it, but there was also the side around the kind of interventions and what we needed to do to bring about the improvements. And I spoke to the team wider, and one of our pupil support assistants said, I would actually like a new challenge. I would like to become involved in trying to, raise the attendance and improve attendance. What can I do? Could I get involved in the admin side? I'd like to upskill in that side. And I was like, okay. So she was up for that. So she learned how to use CMIS. And our office staff do the period 1 and period 5 as every school will do, and that feeds through. But it was the periods in between where registers weren't being completed accurately. Young people might just go to the toilet, arrive at the class late, that wasn't being updated and it wasn't getting put through. And what was happening previously was the pastoral staff themselves were spending a lot of time in chasing up admin. And now that we had was someone who was fully focused on that, and they were able to do that, running around the departments, checking in with pupils, phoning up parents, saying to the pastoral staff, that child is missing, or no, that child has been here all the time. And that's it sorted now. So it means that I would say now our CMIS and our coding is much more accurate because we have freed up that time and we've got somebody who's doing that, and she's really enjoying it, and she is driving change within that process as well and supporting us to make changes. But the other side of it was that kind of strategic overview in terms of, as a pastoral team and a wider school, what were we doing to improve attendance and what could we do? And my colleague, who was unable to join us today, she's currently skiing and enjoying herself, so she's currently absent from school, obviously, but she led the improvement on that side. So Jill Van Looy started off with a practitioner inquiry, and she took the included, engaged and involved in parts 1 and 2, and she used that as the basis of our starting our professional reading. And from that, and from wider reading, she took the idea of creating a group called Connect, which I will talk about a bit later on, but that was our first project solely aimed at attendance. I then took on the role of looking at data. Now, this was before we had all the toolkits, so it was about how we could use CMIS and the data from there to have an impact wider school and how we were using that data. We have also engaged with partners around that as well, though, and we worked very closely with Strathclyde University and two of their professors, Dr. Klein and Dr. Sousa. You've probably read a lot of their papers already if you've got an interest in attendance, but they came in and they took a lot of our data and they did a huge piece of analysis for us. And I've just put in one of their graphs because and this is probably typical for a lot of you, I would think, but it was that dip that they saw, you know, at Christmas and at the summer, people taking those early holidays. And so in response, we changed our narrative around that. So we wouldn't talk about, you know, summer holidays are coming and that kind of wind down. Any activities that we had, they were always focused around health and well-being. Obviously working the class, and we've always had this, you're working up to the last minute, but to repeat that messaging back out to parents and at Christmas time as well, you know, the activities are still around health and well-being, and the important thing is being in school. And this year, changing the narrative with the parents and the expectations there and highlighting to them about the dips and that we're noticing the dip. We've actually this year seen a 1.4% increase at the same time for Christmas to this time last year. So it's a really simple thing, but it's made a wee change. So going back to when I first came in and we looked at what we had to do to improve, one of the first things was our policy. Now, we reviewed our policy. Our most recent one I've shamelessly stolen from Wood Farm High School. Graham's sitting there in the audience. We adapted it for our own use, but he has a lot of stuff in there that I thought was really useful about in terms of like how to have a conversation with a parent and about the follow-up. Just simple techniques, but I thought they were really helpful. But I would say that we review our policy annually because we are always changing our practice and trying to do tweaks to improve. And the policy just isn't if a parent phones up and wants to see it. It's for any new members of staff that are joining the school that you've got there. So it's really important that that is reflecting your practice. When we were contacting parents, I felt as though that the conversations tended to be quite negative, you know, around attendance. So we wanted to look at how we could support. So again, we were starting to change our narrative around that as well. We produced leaflets, and the leaflets were full of very basic information about what they can do to support, you know, take mobile phones off at night, that kind of thing. Because parents, I think, have a tough time at home, particularly if circumstances are challenging in getting the young person in. We also would send home letters that would be taken from SEMAS that would have a percentage rate on it. And if you're getting a letter in that says your son or daughter's percentage is currently sitting at 70%, it doesn't always really mean much to the parent. So what we did was we took those stats, and this table here shows you from August right through to June, what the attendance would mean if you were sitting at 70%. And you can see that that equates to 376 lessons have actually been missed. And then the next stage of that is we took our own attainment data and we looked at the attendance percentage versus the number of national fives that they were getting. And you can see there that if you are 95% and above, you've got a 6.7%, or sorry, your chances of getting national fives sit at 6.7, whereas if you're looking at attendance there below 90% or 85%, it drops significantly. And of course you want to look at the longer term picture because you want to think about them staying on at school and that progression on to higher and improvement in life chances. So changing the narrative with parents. We also had letters that would have on things like, you know, maybe within the first month your child's attendance is sitting at 80%. Well, you've only been back for 4 weeks, so actually that's maybe a bit misleading. So we're changing the tone of the letters as well and how we're communicating with them to make it actually more relevant. We're seeing now toolkits emerging. As I said, we didn't have that to begin with when we started in this journey, but the toolkits that are coming out, this is the Forth Valley and West Lothian one here. These are game changers for us because they give us that ability to really drill down into the data and to identify where our trends are and, you know, where there's emerging issues and who we need to focus on. So these have been really helpful. So of course, the one from East Lothian allows you to take live data from your business intelligence on SEMAS if you're using that, put it in, and you can see information. East Renfrewshire have also produced their own toolkit that's using Power BI, and this is updated monthly for us, and that lets us see our trends there, and we can drill down into that. The beauty with this one here is I can drill down into individuals, and then I can start to do my work with those individuals, and the other one there gives me that really good overview as well. But they're evolving all the time and making progress with them. Now, using those tracking toolkits, we have been able to drill down, and we've been able to identify cohorts of young people who would benefit from our input. And previously we have used our PEF money for different projects, but we are now using our PEF money to support 2 workers. The first of which is a health and wellbeing worker, and he has a particular skill set around mental health. Now, we have always delivered programmes of work, our interventions for our young people, and if you were to look at them, we've got around 50 plus that we can draw on at any one time. They're not all happening at any one time, but we have that expertise within our team and wider team and partners that we can draw on. The difference here is that we have one person who can respond tomorrow if I have an issue, or can respond this afternoon, and can do a bespoke programme that is tailored to the needs of the particular individual that we are working with. We have some young people who are dysregulated and they're maybe not ready to go into classes every day when they come in, and they need that soft start and they need that input. And the reality is that your pastoral teams are often very stretched, and they have significant caseloads there, and they don't always have the time that they would want to spend with an individual at that time. So we have Craig, who is working with us just now and doing a tremendous job. And one of the projects he's picked up just now actually is around mental health for boys. And he's using sporting personalities to help break down the stigma, and he's creating that programme, and he's doing it one-to-one with some young people to help them, with their anger management, for example, but he's also doing group work as well where there's vulnerabilities. And his posts will evolve and respond to the needs of the school as we progress. We also have another worker, a health and wellbeing worker, who's employed through Fair Scotland. Some of you may already use Fair Scotland, it's a charity. And our Fair worker picked up the work that Jill had started back with the Connects group. So the initial group was 19 young people who had been identified from primary where the attendance was falling between 93 and 70%. Through consultation with the primary and looking at other background factors, they identified a group that they wanted to work with, and Jill took the lead on that. Now, Jill is a pastoral teacher, but she worked with that group on this extended transition programme, but it was for young people who weren't already receiving extended transition, so it was a bespoke group. But the whole focus of the group was around connections. How do you form connections for the young people with the school and with the staff within the school? And it was successful. It was a really good programme. The young people, they got to choose where they wanted to go in the school to do project work. We thought they would all be going to PE, which was one of the reasons why Jill had chosen it. She's a PE teacher, so she thought, I'll take them all. In reality, nobody chose PE. They all went to art, and they went to the kitchens, and they wanted to go to technical, these environments that they don't necessarily have in the primary school. So they came once every month for this extended transition and took part in these activities, and the final one culminated with the parents coming in. So we built up that relationship with the young people, and the whole time we're talking about attendance, we're working on that connection with the school, working in those relationships, and then we get the opportunity to meet the parents and work with them, and we celebrate the success and the achievements of the young people who've attended. With Grace, we've decided to extend that and try and grow that. Now, the success rate that we had before was at the end of S1, because the programme continued, I should have said that, when they came into high school, they still had those monthly meetings, but the monthly meetings were more around target setting. And their attendance out of the 19, we had a 67%. We managed to improve their attendance. So it was showing signs that this could work and could have significant impact for us. So when we had employed the Fair worker, we decided to use the Connects model with that and to try and grow it. So Grace, our worker, is linking in with our cluster at the moment. They've identified a group of young people and they are having weekly meetings. And there is a programme of work that is set out, and the programme of work is things like outdoor learning, arts and crafts, physical activity, leadership. They're doing lots of different things between Christmas and up to when they come in August. She also runs a school holiday club as well, so that for young people who, that break in the summer, that's just too much for them to come back to all at once, she'll continue to regularly check in with them and bring them into school. But the Connects programme that she is running at the moment has been significant, and I'll show you the stats from that in a second. But after they have been in the Connects programme and they come into high school, it changes to a leadership programme, and the leaders are taking forward different projects within the school, so that we're still keeping that sense of belonging and that relationship building with them. And also that sense of security for some of them, because they're just a bit unsure about high school. So in terms of impact, this first graph here is for S1. We are always meticulous at the start of the year of setting targets. And it's normally a measurable target that we would put on. And the measurable target in this case was our current stat for S1, the Connects group coming up from primary was 79%, 79.6. We set a target of 85%. They've actually they're sitting on that target at the moment. Our thing now will be to try and maintain that target with them. And S2, they've actually exceeded their target. So they're sitting at 80.5 and they have gone up to 89%. So we are hoping that through this Connects programme that we can continue to build on that success. But again, Grace has the time. She meets with them at intervals and lunch times. She is very responsive. She's got a group of girls there who just love her and want to be around her. And it's all about the relationships there. And she is their hook. And she has the time to create the different programmes and deliver them. She's not going to get called for a please take. She's not under the pressure with exams. She's got a different kind of pressure here. But it's working really well. And if I'm being honest, we stole that idea from Glasgow in terms of the fair worker. I've put this one here about leaver destinations, and you're probably thinking, what's the relevance? Why have you got that in? The reason why I put that in is because we have another worker. Her name is Lorna. She's our DYW support worker, and she attends all our joint support team meetings, as does Grace. And it means that Lorna is very quickly becoming aware of the young people who are at risk of disengaging, and she will start to involve them in employability work that she is doing. So, for example, at the moment, Lorna has responsibility for the participatory budget across East Renfrewshire, and she is working with the Connections group in S2. So they've got a budget of £3,000, and they're looking at bids from across the school, and they're taking ownership of that to decide who's getting the money. So it's a nice way of linking in with Lorna. It's developing their leadership skills and that resilience for them, that communication skills. But Lorna will probably continue to work with many of them as they progress through high school, and she will already be thinking about post-school, which one of the ones of them might need that personal development input, getting them ready for the world of work. She'll also, by S4, be looking at some of them for flexible work placements, so getting a curriculum that helps work for them and doing that bespoke approach again. So the joint working is really key there, that collaborative working. We have a nurture programme, a forest school programme. We're very fortunate. We have got someone who is qualified to take expeditions, worldwide expeditions actually, so really, really skilled at what he does. And the young people who are identified for nurture, particularly the boys, love it. He does a lot of outdoor learning with them, and that's a real hook. So maybe some of the young people who are involved in Connections will be identified for this, but it also might involve wider young people as well, because we know that we have young people who are coming up who require nurture who do attend every day. So that's a mixture of young people. The really exciting thing that's happening in our school at the moment is IDPBL, so interdisciplinary project-based learning. I can't talk. So in our BGE courses, we are now seeing whole school leadership projects, and these have been game-changing as well. The young people are loving them, and they're all set around real-life context. So the bottom one there is around circular economy. So every young person in S2 is involved in was involved in circular economy. And they've been working with Austereo to look at how we can become sustainable, or how schools can become sustainable nationally. And they're leading a lot of the project work there, but teaching them about resilience, about confidence building, team working, communication, but building in that resilience so that we don't get them disengaging. Even if they come from primary and then get their attendance as high, it's not unusual in the high school to start to see a fall off as they progress and as work gets more challenging. But we're trying to give them these opportunities early doors to help build that resilience and that connection again. We had a dip in our attendance for S2, lower SIMD girls in particular, and we talked to them about what would work for you, what do you want to see, and they wanted beauty school. So we have a beauty salon now, and actually we're looking to deliver that in middle school as a qualification for some of them, and we're working with partners to do that. They also wanted dance, so we introduced dance. I have to say that our wider staff are phenomenal in embracing change, and we don't need to go to them to say that's not working. What can work? They're very often coming to us saying, we've heard of a new course, we think this could really work for A, B and C. So last year we introduced leadership. I know that that's already in many schools. Next year we're looking at bringing in sustainability. We've brought in refereeing, and again this is all in response to pupil voice and what they're asking for next year. So that was from last year, but my point is that you have to be responsive to the needs of the young people, and it often has to be very individually tailored and bespoke.